Hello and welcome to the BizNews Edge. It's Tuesday, the 14th of July, 2026. I'm Alec Hogg. On today's show, the Public Investment Corporation has suspended its own chief executive, and a familiar airport is once again at the center of the storm. Purple Group's Easy Equities has made a multi-million-dollar AI acquisition of a key supplier, and the market has already voted on that one. Italtile has lost a key manufacturing CEO, it's CEO of the whole group, who joins his emigrated family in Australia, and investors aren't exactly comfortable about it. Trevor Manuel doesn't hold back on what greed and negligence did to Eskom. And our anchor story today, how a Pretoria pharmacy built what regulators say was an unlawful factory for fake weight loss jabs, and why it took 2 years for anyone to step in and check. Well, let's get into it. Today's opening story, the Public Investment Corporation, which manages 3.5 trillion rands worth of government pensioners' money, has suspended its chief executive barely a year into Patrick Dlamini's term. Patrick was previously the CEO of the Development Bank of South Africa. He was placed on precautionary suspension this week after a whistleblower complained that he had mishandled conflicts of interest relating to a long-running dispute over the Lanseria Airport. These apparently included past ties that Mr. Dlamini had with the investment firm Harith General Partners, which owns the airport. Chief Investment Officer of the PIC, August van Heerden, has also stepped down from his acting role. That's the 5th executive suspension at the PIC in 2 years. When there's so much money at stake, my goodness, you've got to be a little concerned at what's going on there. Better news for Harith, though. The Competition Commission on Friday recommended, with conditions, approval for its aviation division to buy Safair Holdings, the owner of Safair, South Africa's biggest domestic airline. Those conditions require that the airport and airline services at Lanseria, which Harith owns, have to be offered to rival carriers on fair, non-discriminatory terms. Same airport, same name, 2 very different regulatory processes converging on one point. And Harith making a big name for itself in South Africa, no doubt. A point of clarity here, Harith's owner, Tsepo Malelwe, is a shareholder in BizNews. Next up, Purple Capital, the group which owns Easy Equities, or at least the controlling stake in it, and a member of the BizNews Ricardo Rand portfolio, is making a substantial acquisition. Not known for doing this kind of thing. They usually grow everything organically. Well, they've bought an Australian firm that is behind its AI baskets tool. The price will be up to $10.75 million. Telescope AI, the name of the firm, has technology which already reaches over 3 million investors around 7 countries. Its founder, Luc Petit, will join Purple Group as Chief AI Officer while continuing to run Telescope in Australia. Purple's chief executive, Charles Savage, who will be amongst the 31 keynote speakers at BNC 9 in the Drakensberg next month, called this the moment when his group moves from leaning in to leading in AI. The market liked it. Purple shares ticked up to R1.75 this morning, though on unusually thin volume. It appears as though sellers are not too keen to let their stock go at the current prices. Now, here's a story that resonates with those who've been watching the emigration, semigration, departure, return of South Africans. Over at Italtile, Lance Foxcroft, who's the CEO of the group for the past 5 years and has been with Italtile for 22 years in total, is taking early retirement at the end of November. Reason? Family commitments and what he calls a punishing commute to Australia, where his family now lives. Group CEO Brandon Wood will personally take over from the outgoing chief executive Foxcroft. Market didn't exactly love it. Italtile shares fell 3.5% this morning to R9.65, although that was on thin volumes. It breaks a strong run for the group, which has been up 20% since early June. Foxcroft previously ran Italtile as a whole, then he moved to ceramic. Now he's moving right out of the company. So it's a real loss of institutional knowledge at the group's vertically integrated manufacturing core, even if there's no sense of panic in today's explanation or indeed the numbers on the markets. Before we get into the core story of the day, Trevor Manuel was delivered a speech on South Africa and Eskom. Went for over an hour. It's on YouTube, and it was recommended to us by Zane Stemming, a member of the BizNews community. It's a sharp one. Manuel was the most successful finance minister South Africa's ever had. You might recall that, it's around nearly 20 years ago when he was finance minister for an extended period, the country was running budget surpluses, not the surplus after you take out the interest payments, but surpluses in total. So Manuel's got the credibility to say what he thinks and for people to listen. And he was speaking at last week's National Development Plan and Economic Strategy seminar, where he rejected the idea that South African Airways was ever properly privatized. In his words, it, and I quote, was stolen and destroyed in the process. But his sharper example still was Eskom. He reminded what was primarily an ANC member audience that Eskom was once considered the best run electricity utility in the world, able to borrow more cheaply than the South African government itself, with enough spare generating capacity that the only thing taxpayers ever needed to worry about funding was electrifying poor households. Everything else Eskom paid for on its own. Well, we know the difference today is stark. Were it not for government guarantees, Eskom would be unable to raise any money whatsoever, certainly not at the rates that it's paying. Manuel's diagnosis for how Eskom collapsed into today's load shedding and pricing crisis was nothing to do with economics, nothing to do with policy failure, in his opinion. It's to do with plain greed and negligence. The full story is on BizNews. And now to our anchor story of the day, and it's one worth slowing down for. This one sounds at first like a fight between two drug companies. Well, it isn't. Not really, anyway. It's a story about what happens when a wildly popular medicine outpaces the people whose job it is to keep it safe and to keep the public safe. At the center of the story, a Pretoria pharmacy called iDexis, a court judgment that was handed down on the 22nd of June, and a weight loss drug you've almost certainly heard of, Ozempic. You don't need any medical or legal background to follow this. I'll keep it simple. A quick word on where the story came from. The reporting is by Maricus Boros, written for BizNews through our commissioning fund. It's money donated by BizNews community members specifically so that we can pay top writers to dig deep into stories that take a long time to put together, sometimes weeks. Many phone calls, many document requests. It just is not economically viable in today's online environment where income, let's put it mildly, is hard to come by. This is the second story that was commissioned by the fund, the first one being Rian Malan's insights into xenophobia in Van Wyksdorp, which actually shows so much about what's going on in South Africa. Both of those pieces, of course, on BizNews. But for our purposes, Marika was the obvious person to write this piece. She's been one of the country's top journalists for more than 4 decades. I worked with her, the early stage of my career when she was already a senior reporter, and that was at the Rand Daily Mail, one of the great newspapers of South Africa, which sadly died during the apartheid era. For the last 25 years, though, Marika has been focused specifically on healthcare. She's had 7 journalism awards along the way. She co-authored 2 books with Professor Tim Noakes, and for BizNews covered his long-running and eventually victorious disciplinary hearing in forensic detail, a case that, much like this one, came down to what regulators can and can't prove, and how long it takes them to prove it. Let's start here with one word that you will hear a lot: peptide. It just means a small chain of building blocks that your body is made of. Semaglutide is one specific peptide, and it's a key ingredient, and this is where it gets important, in Novo Nordisk's Ozempic and Wegovy, those drugs that have made the Denmark-based Novo Nordisk one of the most valuable companies in Europe. South African law does allow a pharmacist to make a custom medicine for one specific patient. Think of a tailor making one suit to order for one customer. It's called compounding, and it's meant to be small, rare, and a one-off. But this Pretoria business, iDexis, drove a bulldozer through that perceived loophole. Well, it saw it as a loophole anyway. According to its own court papers, the company was producing about 84,500 units of this semaglutide a month, more than Novo Nordisk's entire South African sales of the real thing. This wasn't a tailor. This was an industrial scale factory dressed up as a tailor's shop. And here's the part that really sank iDexis' case. At first, in court papers filed last year, iDexis said its product was identical to Novo's. Then, in updated papers filed this year, iDexis' own scientists admitted that their semaglutide was made through a chemical process, not the biological one that Novo uses. That's the opposite of identical. Picture a fake designer handbag. Same shape, same logo, same price tag, stitched together in a totally different factory from different materials. You'd have no way of knowing it's not the real thing until the handbag starts falling apart in your hands. Of course, it's much worse when it comes to medicines. On top of all this, even worse, is that iDexis never even disclosed where its raw materials had come from. Now, here's the part that should worry you, whatever medicine you take or don't. Regulators finally inspected iDexis' Pretoria premises in May this year. No proper ventilation system for making sterile medicine. No records matching what was actually produced. No samples kept back for testing. And no system at all for tracking whether patients were having bad reactions. Meaning, if something went wrong, there was no process to catch it or warn anyone. The inspectors were told when they did visit the factory that nothing was currently being made. But then they found packaging in the very next room. The products were also given a 6-month shelf life, the kind that you'd only expect from a product that had undergone rigorous lab testing. iDexis clearly hadn't. Some of its patients, those who were imbibing this medicine, did report problems, nausea, headaches, stomach issues. Regulators also referred to hospital admissions. And here's the most uncomfortable fact in the whole judgment. Novo Nordisk first complained about this back in early 2024. It took over 2 years for anyone to actually walk in and inspect the premises in Pretoria, where the fakes were being made. The court has ordered iDexis to stop making and selling those products for now. But that doesn't make the demand disappear. Novo's papers pointed to one doctor's practice in Bloemfontein, which had over 41,000 patients on file. Seriously, 41,000 for a one-off tailor shop. No finding was made against him, and he disputes the claim entirely. But regulators have warned that any doctor who prescribes or stocks these recalled products from iDexis could face disciplinary action. And in the medicals field, that means bye-bye, no more doctor you. Well, this isn't just a South African problem. In the United States, a court convicted the founder of a telehealth company last year for handing out, get this, more than 37 million pills of a controlled medicine, and that was worth over $100 million. A doctor signed off on prescriptions for patients that he'd never examined in person. Different drug, same playbook. A little bit like the OxyContin saga, where they were incentivized to give painkillers that had heroin-grade capabilities to millions of Americans, turning many of them into addicts. Many died. One doctor who spoke to Marika and BizNews on this story asked not to be named, put it quite simply, shutting down one visible operator doesn't kill demand. It just risks pushing patients towards an unregulated black market with even less oversight than iDexis had. So let's move on to the so what. What does it mean for you? Well, if you invest in healthcare or pharmaceutical companies, watch what happens as more drug patents expire over different parts of the world. Novo's own patent on semaglutide expired here in South Africa and in India and China, important, back in March. So cheap copies flooded into the country, and they came in fast. And regulators are usually very slow to catch up. That gap is exactly where the risk lives for everyone involved in the chain. And for those who sail close to the wind, the opportunity. If you happen to be a general practitioner who's prescribing weight loss medication, this judgment is a direct warning. Regulators have now said in writing that any doctor who prescribes, dispenses, or even keeps stock of these recalled products risks disciplinary action, including doctors who genuinely believed that they were sourcing a legitimate compounded product. I didn't know where it came from will no longer be an acceptable answer going forward. And rightly so, when you consider the impact that this can have on customers buying it out of trust. And that, if you're one of those many South Africans currently taking a compounded weight loss injection, it's worth a real conversation with your doctor. Not a shrug, what does it mean to me? Ask directly where your medicine comes from and whether it's SAHPRA registered or a compounded one, i.e. from the fake suppliers. Affordable and untested are two very different things. And if you're simply weighing up whether to start one of these drugs at all, remember, a cheaper price tag tells you nothing about what's actually in the vial. Great story by Marika Sporos. You can read it on BizNews, but I'm sure this is at the very least whet your appetite. And that wraps up today's Edge, a governance crisis widening at the PIC, Easy Equities betting big on AI, a leadership change at Italtile's manufacturing core, the ex-CEO taking over manufacturing and now being, out the picture. Trevor Manuel's blunt verdict on what greed costs us at Eskom, and a hard look at what regulators missed while a fake weight loss drug factory grew right under their noses, generating a reported 50 million rand a month in sales. Thank you for joining me. You can read Marika's full investigation and more of our commissioned journalism at biznews.com. I'm Alec Hogg. Until next time, stay informed, stay invested. In uncertain times, good information is priceless. The BizNews conference is heading back to the Drakensberg. Join me, Alec Hogg, from the 11th to the 14th of August for BNC 9, Champagne Sports Resort, where it all began, and where our community gathers for honest conversations, smart investing insights, and direct access to some of South Africa's sharpest minds. Come and rub shoulders with the best we've got. 28 keynote speakers, 3 days. Seats are available now. Book your seat by clicking the link in the description. Start your day a step ahead. BizNews Insider. It delivers the business stories that matter every morning straight to your inbox, sharp, fast, and free. Subscribe now.